Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about season 2 of the show, House of the Dragon. Fun fact, the forest from episode 4, the red dragon and the gold, was used in Gladiator. Also, the people during that battle in that episode were really lit on fire instead of just using special effects. This season came out in 2024 and stars Emma D'Arcy, Olivia Cooke, and Matt Smith, and was created by George R.R. Martin and Ryan Condal. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Season 2 of House of the Dragon sees Rhaenyra, leader of Team Black, and Aegon, who is Team Green, trying to gather support for their claim to the Iron Throne. Throughout the season, there is war looming, and while Rhaenyra tries to have minimal bloodshed, Aegon does whatever to prove he is the rightful heir. House of the Dragon Season 2 is a fantasy show that immerses you in this world filled with conflict and drama. It has similar vibes to Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Rings of Power. House of the Dragon had a great season 1, laying down the foundation for what would eventually be a Targaryen civil war. In this season, I was invested in the story, but by the finale, I felt like we were being blueballed because there was so much talk and anticipation for this war and other events only for the show to basically be like, okay, we will get to that next season, even if they had been hinting at it all season long. The season is still good, but they need to balance what to include in the season and what to hint at for future seasons. Rhaenyra, played by Emma D'Arcy, is the leader of Team Black and who Viserys, the last king, and her father said he wanted as his heir, and in my opinion, the better choice out of the two options. She wears the crown of Jaehaerys and her father, which was delivered to her by Sir Eric. At the end of the last season, we see her lose her son Luke, and while she wants revenge against Aemon, she is also trying not to start a war. We see her building support and trying to make sure she doesn't lose any more of her family, but also show people that she should be on that throne. At the beginning of the season, Rhaenyra is at Dragonstone mourning her son's death. Her dragon is Syrax, and we see that she adores Syrax, and I think the one thing that's not really discussed is that Eryx is an offspring of Syrax, so both Rhaenyra and Syrax lost a kid. It's nice that they had a proper funeral for Luke and shows just how much Rhaenyra cares and loves for her kids, and while you might be saying, well, yeah, she's their mother, it's not the same for every family in this show. She spends most of the season at Dragonstone plotting and planning, which brings her frustration because she wants to be out and about. I felt that they showed her as being so weak and not directly involved in anything, which was frustrating because it made me feel like the writers didn't want us to view her as a tyrant, but it made her seem very passive and like she was so removed from the actual events happening and forgot that she was queen and this was a looming war. She complained multiple times about her frustrations about being removed from the war, and it was upsetting me that she was not doing anything. At some point, I would just stop feeling bad if you can't help yourself. In episode 3, I noted how she has tried to avoid war but can't anymore, and boy was I wrong because she avoided war the rest of the season, and even though I thought she was ready to go. It was cool to see people throw their support to her and how they were ready to fight for her no matter what, but her hesitancy made people question if she was right for the job. I just think that she needed to be slightly more aggressive and actually do something besides walk around Dragonstone, not saving the people that were being killed. She is married to Damon, and they even get into a fight, and he refuses to say outright that he supports her. And he leaves, and the people ask her about it, and she's just kind of like out of sight, out of mind. One of the smartest things she did this season was listen to Massaria, which got more supporters in King's Landing and made people start to question if the Greens are good leaders. She eventually has some lowborn people try to claim a dragon, which ends up being a feast for Vermithor, but she finds 2 new riders in that whole situation, giving her the advantage in the end. In the middle of the season, Rhaenyra goes to sneak to talk to Alicent to avoid the war, and I think she was being a little stupid thinking that Alicent would actually help after all that has gone on. She does learn that Alicent thought Aegon should be king because Viserys told her about the Aegon the Conqueror's dream, and she thought that he was talking about their little rapist alcoholic son. Rhaenyra and Alicent talk again in the finale, which was a great conversation, but then made me question, is the show about Aegon and Rhaenyra going after the throne or Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship? One of the best scenes with Rhaenyra is the ending of episode 7, where she sees Aemon retreating and we see her with all of her dragons, and it just looks like she is just ready to fight. I mean, it kind of gets ruined because in the next episode she does not go to fight, but it was nice to see her, showing off her brand new riders. Massaria, portrayed by Sonia Mizuno, escapes King's Landing barely after almost being killed by the Greens and starts helping Rhaenyra. I love that she was around, and while people see her as lesser because of the crowd she runs with, she becomes extremely resourceful, a true master of whispers, and is able to offer a perspective of someone who is not highborn. Without Massaria, Rhaenyra would be dead because she is the one who warned somebody about Eric coming to kill Rhaenyra. I really wish they would have showed that on screen to further drive home that it was her in the episode that saved Rhaenyra. I loved how she had access to King's Landing and was able to specifically address issues that some of the people were dealing with and increase the support for Rhaenyra. They kissed this season and I was like, OMG, a little scandalous. So I wonder if more will be seen from that relationship, but as of now, I like Massaria. The fight between Eric and Eric was intense, but also kind of sad. It's one thing to have twins on opposing sides in a show, but to give them the same name with different spellings is a sure way to confuse me. I love how they were twins and pretty equal match when fighting, and were fighting in such a confined space. I knew once Christensen Eric to kill Rhaenyra that he was going to be dead, because there's no way that they would kill Rhaenyra off that early. And from my understanding, Eric is the one who was guarding Rhaenyra, is the one who actually kills his brother and then kills himself. I think part of it has to do with trust, because how could she trust that it was him after that? But also, he just killed his twin brother, which is a very rough thing to live with, so he just decided to not live with it. Jace, or Jacaerys, is played by Harry Collette, and this season he gets a little more screen time since he's now the heir to Rhaenyra and wants to take on more responsibilities even though she does not want him in harm's way. Jace can be a bit of a hothead and seem like he is always looking for a fight, and I think he needs to learn the balance between when calm is needed and when aggression is needed. There were times where he questioned Rhaenyra or was rude to her, and she was very kind to him, but she really needed to put him in his place. He has frustrations just like Rhaenyra since he isn't really involved in the battles or the political alliances, but his actions show why he isn't. Like, great, he gets the help of the Freys this season, but his rash movements will get him killed. There is a joke online about him blue stealing because of how he looked like he was posing when he was standing in the room. And I started to notice that it wasn't anything, serious, but it was just funny to see that. I love to see him with Bela, who I'm not sure is his wife, but I think that is the idea. They kind of support each other, and I feel like Bela is very wise and is able to talk him down when he's pissed. Also, I love their matching outfits when we see them together. Great choice, in my opinion. Early in the season, we see that while his brother was unsuccessful in gathering support, he was with Cregan Stark and his Winter Wolves, and we get a glimpse of the Wall. This leads to one of the most heartbreaking scenes this season when he returns and he's trying to tell his mom of the success he has, and he is trying so hard to keep it together, and in the end he just can't contain his emotions when looking at Rhaenyra, and she hugs him and he breaks down. I thought the scene showcased some great acting, but also showed how in war or conflict people are lost, and sometimes those losses hit close to home, and at that, time they are just humans dealing with, the loss of a loved one. And it's just really sad. In episode 5, Jace mentions that there is a lot of intermingling with the Targaryens throughout history and that they should use that to find dragon riders for Vermithor and Silverwing. This was smart And it was a great suggestion by him, but I felt like the writers forgot that he suggested it like 2 episodes later because then he was mad at Rhaenyra for letting people try to claim dragons. I just feel like that concern should have been brought up by someone else because how are you getting mad at something that you suggested? I'm glad that they fixed Jace's hair this season because one thing that irritated me is that whatever wig he had on in season one didn't look like either of his supposed dad's or his mom's hair, but now he looks like Sir Harwin's son. The question of his parentage comes up again, and this time it's from Jace when he is trying to explain why he doesn't think letting lowborns having a chance, at claiming a dragon is a good thing to do. I really feel that Jace was making a great point, but the way he said it was very classist and snobby. The dragons are seen as gods, and the people who ride them are seen as more important, which is, part of the reason the Targaryens have been able to stay in power for so long, which I feel like the show doesn't harp on enough, the mythos of these dragons. Jace is basically questioning what would make people believe that he is the rightful heir slash future king due to who his father is being questioned concerning the distaste for bastards. And then if Lowborn can claim dragons whom the small folk don't know have Targaryen ancestry, then it takes away from this idea that the Targaryens are the house of the dragon and are born to lead and sit on the Iron Throne. A recurring theme this season is dispelling this idea that the dragons are gods and the only people who are special can ride them. And with this, I took it as Jace being like, yes, this will help you in the short term, but in the long term, the implications of showing that dragons can actually be ridden by non-Targaryens will be bring, challenges to the Targaryens' right to the throne. In the book, Rhaenys has black hair, which makes Jace and Luke less suspicious as bastards because the thought is maybe that their black hair comes from their grandmother. And I always wonder why in the show she has white hair. And this moment made me realize that maybe this is why, because they want to really harp on how this changes the perspective of if Rhaenyra's line will be able to rule after she is gone. Bela, who is played by Bethany Antonia, did a great job this season, even though we get minimal time with her. She often seems like the voice of reason amongst the men in her life and is constantly telling them to get their shit together in the most calm way. I often forget that she is Damon's kid because I feel like they have very minimal interactions, and I would love to get more between the two. I was so happy we got to see her on Moondancer this season and how she had Crispy Cole on the run. Bela seems very sure of herself, as evident, when her grandfather asks her to be the Lord of Driftmark, and she says, I am blood and fire. Driftmark must pass to salt and sea. Phoebe Campbell plays Rhaena, who feels like the outcast this season, which made me feel bad for her, and I also kind of forgot that she is Damon's daughter. At the beginning of the season, she is clearly upset with the news of Luke, but it feels like she is left to mourn by herself. She has issues claiming a dragon, which everyone seems to know, but no one really tries to comfort her about that. And when she is sent to the Vale with Rhaenyra's kids, it causes even more separation from her family, and it feels like she was just constantly looked down on from the Lady of the Eyrie, Jane Eyre. She realizes that there is a wild dragon there and decides to forego her babysitting duties, which I must harp on because they are very important. And then she decides to go on this little wilderness trip to find this dragon that's eating charbroiled sheep. I feel like she is a character I am aware of, but the show has not dug deeper into her personality and given us a chance to really know her. Like, I really want to know, why she doesn't have a dragon, but I also really want her to get a dragon. But then I'm like, okay, what's next? Because I still don't really know what she's doing. And is she still babysitting? Like, I just don't really know anything about her. I was happy that she finds the dragon in the finale, but I felt like we spent too long getting there. She notices the sheep early on, and, she knows that it's a wild dragon, and she even talks to Jane about it, and then she sneaks out, and we follow her tracking it. This shows her dedication, but it gets to a point that with everything going on, this storyline just needed to move faster. Corlys, aka the Sea Snake, is played by Steve Toussaint, who spends most of his time this season walking that pier and watching his sons instead of talking to them. Later in the season, he becomes the Hand of the Queen, which I thought was fitting because he seemed like the only living person who could do it. I feel like Rhaenys made him a better person and made him not be a deadbeat dad, or at least tried to, which I was happy to see, while his granddaughter reminded him that he has duties and responsibilities when he was hanging around that pier lurking after Rhaenys died and Bela turned down his offer to be heir to Driftmark. I'm glad in the end that Alan tells him he is a deadbeat and that there is nothing he can do to change how bad their past was, and it's time to move on and just pretend that they are co-workers. I do hope that next season we see the sea snake on the boat named the Queen That Never Was, which I still think is a shady ass name, considering he spent all season repairing this ship that we didn't even get to see him on, and I want to see how it will play out with him as the Hand. Alan of Hull, who is portrayed by Abukar Salim, is a bastard of Corlys, and while not a dragon rider, he does become a high-ranking seaman. I love how he sets expectations with his brother Adam and doesn't expect anything from Corlys. He definitely gives a big brother vibe and is fiercely loyal, and I would want him on my side. My favorite scene with him is when he tells Corlys that they don't need anything from him because he hasn't been there their entire life, and I thought it was fitting since Corlys has been avoiding having conversations with them the entire season. Fun fact, Abu Bakr and the Lady of the Eyrie, played by Amanda Collins, both were in the sci-fi show Raised by Wolves that was also on HBO. Clinton Liberty is Adam of Hull, who becomes the new writer of Sea Smoke this season, and I loved how he was trying to figure out where he belonged, and then we quickly find out it's with the Dragon Riders. He seems like the nicest guy, and even though he and Corlys have a non-existent relationship, Rhaenyra seems to be fond of him. Sea Smoke was stalking him all season, and in the scene where Sea Smoke claims him, I kind of jumped because that dragon popped out of nowhere. Damon. My God, how this storyline was infuriating. Damon, played by Matt Smith, runs off early in the season to claim Harrenhal after a fight with Rhaenyra due to his reluctance to bend the knee to her and listen to basic instructions. He is ordered to kill Aemon in episode 1, and he tells Blood and Cheese to kill someone else if Aemon isn't there, which leads them to kill Aegon's son and heir Jaehaerys. He single-handedly made it harder for Rhaenyra because then people blamed her and said, how awful can someone be to kill a child? And Daemon doesn't even admit to it. After they argue, he goes to claim Harrenhal, where he is tortured by the ghost of his past, and we are tortured by this storyline being drawn out for the majority of the season. He ends up meeting Alice Rivers, who is this weird little goth witch in Harrenhal who seems to make things worse before they get better. Kept wondering if he was the better person to be heir to the throne, and it was proven time and time again that he most definitely was not. Because of Daemon thinking he deserved to be king and the crazy hallucinations, he almost didn't get any support in the Riverlands. In the end, he has a vision of the future, which was cool to see because it hints at a bigger threat, that he will become one of the Night King generals, maybe, and that Daenerys will be the one to save the future, or as some might say, the princess that was promised. Which also seems to kind of rewrite what we know from Game of Thrones. While this was cool to see, it didn't make up for me having to see him have a mental breakdown each episode. The one thing I will say is that it was cool to see the return of some characters from season 1 who are no longer with us, which reminded me of how great their performances were. I'm glad that he got the support of the Rivermen, but they really needed to wrap up that hunting of Harrenhal a lot quicker. Daemon rides Caraxes, and I've always loved that dragon because of his long neck that's kind of like a snake, and it always stands out more to me. We barely get to see Caraxes because most of Daemon's time is spent at Harrenhal, but I did love the little time that we got with him. Through Daemon's adventures, we meet Sir Simon Strong, played by Simon Russell Beale, who is one of the many highlights of this season. When we first meet him, he is the controller of Harrenhal, but it's falling apart and Daemon comes to conquer it, and he's like, it's yours, to Daemon's surprise. Throughout the season, he made me laugh because he made sure Daemon knew his place and that Simon was loyal to Rhaenyra, not him. One of my favorite scenes is when Damon asks him, "What would you call the husband of the queen?" And Simon says, "King." And Damon tries to interject and agree. And then Simon finishes and says, "Consort." Simon may not be the strongest or fiercest, but he is loyal to Rhaenyra. And when he hears Damon and Sir Alfred talking about Damon being the rightful heir, he sends word to Rhaenyra letting her know, "Come get your husband." I love how excited he was when Damon and Rhaenyra made up and everyone bent the knee, and I'm sure he will be even happier to have Damon leave. Simon was a highlight of this season, and his character is one of the few reasons why I enjoyed visiting Harrenhal. We meet Oscar Tully, portrayed by Archie Barnes, whose grandfather is Lord Paramount, but is dying at the beginning of the season. Damon wants to use Oscar's help to unite the Riverlands to raise an army, and Oscar refuses to do anything behind his grandfather's back. When I first met his character, I was just like, oh, he's weak and young, and he'll be a pushover or worse, end up dead. However, I was very wrong because he comes back after his grandfather dies, which they hint that Alice had something to do with. And he comes with all the houses that are under him, and he not only unites them, but gets Damon to get his act together. He reminded me of Lyanna Mormont, like he was young, but don't be fooled. He knows how to put some older people in their place and lead. Before I mention the Greens, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Rhaenys, aka the queen that never was, who was brilliantly portrayed by Eve Best. She dies this season, but she is and has been one of the best characters on this show. At the beginning of this season, I loved how so many looked up to Damon or saw him as a threat, and she constantly met him head on, and some might even say that she gagged him on a numerous amount of different occasions, reminding him she does not take orders from him and he is not the king. Even the non-verbal interactions with Damon and Rhaenys were great because she knew him and the stuff he would pull. When they are trying to figure out who killed Aegon's son, they show Damon looking nervous while she is just staring at him and she knows that it was him. Rhaenys is married to Corlys and they are shown to be madly in love, and she helps make him a better person. Before she died, she encouraged him to interact with his bastards, whom she is aware of, which was shocking, but I love how she didn't hold grudges towards the actual kids, unlike others we have met in the Game of Thrones universe, like Catelyn Stark. Before her death, she seemed like the perfect choice for a hand. She was super level headed, smart, and sometimes would step back and look at the bigger picture instead of being so hyper focused on what was right in front of them. In the first couple of episodes, she drops one of the best lines. Soon they will not know what it is that started the war in the first place. And that resonated with me because the season is spent gearing up for war, and there is a lot of small battles. But when we look back at, what had started the war, was it Luke's death, Aemon losing an eye, Aegon getting the throne, or something else? She mentioned examples to Rhaenyra, and it's not her taking sides and telling her what started the war, but telling her when people look back at those lines, they get blurred, and to be mindful of that. Meleys is her dragon, also known as the Red Queen, and from what we have seen, their bond seemed to be the strongest, like they truly understood each other. And when they would fly or go into battle, Meleys and Rhaenys worked with each other for optimal results. Rhaenys is one of the few dragon riders as well that knows how to ride a dragon in a battle and not just for travel. In the Battle of Rook's Rest, she unfortunately dies, which was heartbreaking, but she puts up such a great fight. I was watching an interview with Eve Best after the episode, and she was talking about how she instructs Meleys to attack instead of Dracarys, and she said that the reasoning is that she wants to take out the dragons, but she doesn't want to cause more casualties of her own people on the ground like the other men are, instead using focused attacks. It was great to see her take out Sunfire and Aegon, and I think if it was a one-on-one, she could have taken out Vhagar, but it was an uneven battle. She had a chance to retreat, but instead chose to fight, which says a lot about Rhaenys. I'm sad that she died, but she went out with a bang. Aegon II is crowned ruler in King's Landing at the end of Season 1, with Aegon the Conqueror's crown as his family usurps power, and in this season, he is trying to find his footing. Tom Glenn Carney portrays him, and he is dumb, and at first he is just useless, but after his son is murdered, he starts making more rash decisions. He didn't even want the throne, but was forced to take it, and everyone around him is starting to realize that he is not the best choice to be on the throne. Hell, he's probably not even in the top 10 best choices for the throne. Otto was Viserys' hand, and he starts as Aegon's hand, but even he can't control him. And when Aegon hangs the rat catchers for everyone to see after his son is killed by one of them, Otto lets him know that this is a dumb decision, and Aegon doesn't realize that it will make the people hate him and view him as cruel. He tries to be a nice king at the beginning of the season when the poor people are asking for help, but this highlights how he doesn't know what he's doing, blindly agreeing to things and then having to turn around and be like, just kidding, which leads to frustration starting to grow due to lack of food and medicine. He questions himself and his role as king, as he should, because all he wants to do is drink and do dumb stuff. Allison tells him that he is not wise and he just needs to sit back and let people handle what's going on. He takes this as people don't take him seriously and he drunkenly rides off into battle, but he seems to forget that him nor his dragon, Sunfire, have ever been into battle and that he also barely knows Valerian. The battle does not end well with him getting burnt to a crisp and being on life support for the rest of the season. He makes strides to get better and eventually flees King's Landing in the finale, but he should really stay on the road and just not come back. I don't know if the goal of the show is to get me to hate him, but I don't really hate him. I'm not saying that I like him. I'm just saying I'm just very neutral with Aegon, and I think it's because he's just so incompetent that he's not even a threat. It doesn't even seem like after everything he wants the throne. He is just doing all of this stuff because he's just being told to. I'm interested to see what happens to him now that his dragon is dead and he's burnt, but I also wonder if he will start to make more decisions on his own. Aegon promotes Larys, played by Matthew Needham, to Master of Whispers, and that creepy man is efficient, and Aegon is lucky to have him. Throughout the season, he is the one person that seems to actually care about Aegon and helps him so much to make smarter decisions. I'm sure he is aware of Aemon's attempt to kill Aegon, and instead of just going with it, he uses it as an opportunity to show his loyalty to Aegon and helps him to get better and eventually escape in the finale. The thing that makes Larys so great as a character is his ability to keep a straight face and keep his emotions in check when talking and giving advice. He is an odd man, but he is extremely useful in certain situations. Allison is played by Olivia Cooke, and she does such a good job portraying this character who I hate, but I'm still interested in seeing what she will do to piss me off next. Even though I love the drama that comes with her character, I often feel like the show focuses too much on her considering she is not the one on the throne and she's not one person going after it. In this season, she gets sidelined more and more and starts to realize how this boys' club doesn't care if she's involved. She is sleeping with Kristen Cole throughout the season, which the show displays way too many times. Due to them sleeping together, he wasn't there to protect Jaehaerys, which she understandably feels guilt about. She takes an abortion brew later in the season, and I was like, look at the pot calling the kettle black after she judged Rhaenyra for sleeping with him in the last season. When she had her abortion brew, she didn't even try to hide the evidence. She just had it all out for everyone to see, and I just know that footman Larys was judging. One big contrast I love in the show is how she interacts with her kids versus Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra seems so kind and loving and talks to them respectfully, and there's a type of respect between them. With Allison, it seems like most of her kids do not want to be bothered. She can't even comfort Aegon after his kid dies. Instead, she goes to sleep with Kristen. She has a distaste for Aemon, which is hinted but should be more boldly stated after he killed Luke. Darren is mentioned this season, but she left him in Old Town to be raised by God knows who, and we know nothing about him. And Helena is the only one she treats nice and protects, and she's clearly her favorite. It's just crazy how she has all these kids, but it doesn't seem like she actually likes them, which is fair, because if Aegon and Aemon were my kids, I too would be disappointed in them. But after getting fired from the King's Court, you would think, hey, maybe I should go check on my child that I'm not raising in Old Town and see how he's doing. No. Alicent and Rhaenyra meet and they talk about what Viserys said on his deathbed, and in this moment she realizes that Aegon, her son, is not who he was talking about, considering there are so many Aegons. But instead of trying to rectify this, she says, hey, I can't because my hands are tied, even though her hands weren't tied when she started all of this shadiness. Also, who in their right mind would look at her son and be like, yep, that's who's meant to be king? She tells Aegon that the crown doesn't imbue wisdom and he should be taking, more advice from her and Otto, which for once I will agree with because he was dumb and the people he surrounded himself with were illogical. When the townspeople riot because they are starving, she is in the middle of it with Helena and she gets fish guts thrown at her as she should, which really makes her see how her offspring are making things worse, minus Helena. This, unfortunately for us, leads her to take time floating in the water outside the city in the next episode, which was very boring to watch. Something that stood out to me in every scene with Alicent was she is going to figure out how to make the situation about her. Like her grandson just got brutally murdered, her father is fired, and you know what she's thinking about? How bad she feels. Like, girl, read the room. No one cares. This goes on and is even evident when she goes to Dragonstone in the finale, where she is like, oh, this has been so hard for me, and makes herself the victim, when she's literally a big part of all of this happening. And I'm so glad Rhaenyra tells her, history will remember you as a cruel queen. I hate her, but one thing I will say is her outfits surely are on point throughout the season. She basically gives up Aegon in the finale so she and Helena can escape, and I'm interested to see what will happen when Rhaenyra gets to the city and Aegon is gone, because Alicent doesn't realize that she is not in the know anymore. She does not know everything going on, so Aegon then left the city. Otto Hightower, who was brilliantly played by Rhys Ifans, had such a big role in season 1, making sure Aegon gets placed on the throne, and quickly comes to regret it for the short time he is around this season. One thing I've come to realize is I hate Otto so much because he's actually good at what he sets out to do, which is usually something shady. Like when his help, he planted seeds that Rhaenyra's kids are bastards, that Aegon is the rightful king, and usurped the throne and killed everyone who would have ruined his plan and more. Like, I hate the man, but he was really efficient. His main goal is to silence Rhaenyra and to keep Aegon on the throne, and even after the death of Jaehaerys, he compartmentalizes his emotions and tries to focus on the bigger picture. When Aegon hangs the rat catchers, Otto yells at him for being dumb, and he's right because it shows how cruel he is for no reason, but Aegon decides to fire him. After Aegon fires him as the Hand, things seem to get worse because of all the rash decisions from Aegon and Aemon. In the end, we see him in prison somewhere, and I don't know where that is, but that's where he belongs. We meet Otto's other child, Sir Gawain, played by Freddie Fox this season, and while he sides with the Greens, I kind of like him for the amount of shit he gives Kristen Cole. Like the first time we meet him, he called Kristen poor like 5 different ways, and it was all hilarious to me. He had a different experience being raised in Old Town by people who are not his father, and it seems like there's some resentment towards his sister because of that, which is great because I love all of the hate that Alicent gets, and she deserves it. When Bela chases him and his men, we do get to see a look of horror on his face, which was just priceless. Throughout the season, he does keep calling out Kristen for being dumb, and even though he is on the same side, I'm not rooting for him. I just like how he comes in and just casts pure judgment on his surroundings. Aemon, who I also call Almond sometimes, is portrayed by Ewan Mitchell, who once again pisses me off this season with his raggedy granny Jurassic Park looking dragon Vagar. In the beginning of the season, he pretends to not even care that he killed his nephew, and even Alicent is shocked. It seems as if Aemon wants the throne and he tries to get it, but he does it very sneakily. Aegon has embarrassed him for years, which we see this season in a ballsy scene, and I think he wants to be in a position where he is above him and Aegon can't bully him anymore. At first, I said maybe he would be a better leader than Aegon, but when he becomes regent, I realized nope, that is wrong. Because while he is a better fighter, he only thinks about control and wants to control the people of King's Landing by locking them in the city with minimal food and resources. And then we see in battle his goal is to win, but he doesn't care about the loss of life inflicted. The real reason Aemon is a threat is because he rides this old, scaly, ancient-looking beast by the name of Vhagar, who is a giant, which makes it hard to go against the Greens because Vhagar had already killed Luke and his dragon at the end of season 1, but in season 2 they kill Rhaenys and Meleys, and I will die on the hill that if it was a 1 versus 1, it would have been different because sometimes speed is more important than size. He keeps Vhagar parked out in the valley and uses her like an intimidation tactic or just to cause more destruction. He and Kristen kind of become besties this season and start planning stuff without talking to Aegon. At Rook's Rest, he was the secret weapon hiding, and when Aegon came to, prove his worth, it upset Kristen because that was really dangerous for the king to be in harm's way, and Aemon took this as the perfect opportunity to attempt to take Aegon out. He doesn't succeed, but he does weasel his way into becoming the king regent, and then removing his mother from her duties. He tries many times to kill Aegon and is always interrupted, and there are some who would never challenge Aemon, but I get the feeling that they know that he is going after the throne. I get the vibe from Aemon that he doesn't see women as his equal, but as beneath him. Aemon is very impulsive, as we can see at the end of episode 7 when he sees a dragon rider and he immediately goes to Vhagar to mount and chase his dragon rider. But this time he sees how Rhaenyra has 3 dragons in his view, and you can see some slight horror on his face knowing he is outnumbered, and he turns around. In the next episode, we see how he burns down a town, which further shows that he uses and abuses the power he has with dragons and will take it out on innocent lives just to assert his dominance. With Aemon having such a big dragon, it is interesting how people often request Vhagar, and while it definitely is an advantage, they show dragons do have to rest and feed, so after a big battle, he does become more vulnerable. Aemon is a character whom I can't wait to see their downfall, but I must say that Ewan is doing such a great job portraying this guy and making me hate him. Fabian Frankel is Kristen Cole, a character I hate so much. And while I'm glad he is still alive in the show, so I have someone to direct all my hate to, I can't wait to see him die. He calls Rhaenyra the whore queen, yet he seems to be the one that's a whoring out with everyone and just ignoring his duties because he's whoring out with Alicent this season. Funny enough, Alicent takes the abortion brew, proving that no one wants to have his kids. Unfortunately, he is a good person to have leading the ground troops because he is good in battle, but he still makes me mad by thinking he is better than everyone. When little Jaehaerys dies, he is questioned and makes up some excuse about where he was, and then he has the nerve to ask Eric a whole bunch of questions as if it wasn't his job to protecting the heir and not having sexual relationships with the old queen. When Alicent was asking if he told anyone about them and said, "What do you take me for?" I audibly responded, "A dumb bitch," because that is what I think of him. He figures out a plan with Aemon to strategically attack places that will help them win the war, which irritates Aegon because he is not in the know, and he starts his journey with a new haircut, which somehow made me hate him even more. At Rook's Rest, he planned for a dragon and instructed Aemon to bring Vhagar, but after Aegon comes with Sunfire, it ruins his plan. With Aegon hurt, he feels like he failed his king, and it made me laugh because I do think that he is a failure, and seeing him sad about being a failure made me happy because I don't like him. I know after Rook's Rest, he knows that Aemon is the one that caused Aegon to be so badly injured, but instead of saying something, he just acts like he doesn't know anything, once again, being dumb. At the end of the season, he gets called out publicly by Sir Gawain for breaking his sworn duties as a Kingsguard by sleeping with Alicent, and he has a moment where he feels remorse, I guess, for his actions, but I don't care. I wish him nothing but the worst. I hate Kristen Cole, but one thing I think must be said is how I saw stuff about people commenting on Fabian's Instagram with threats, and it's wild to me that people can't separate the actor from the show. Use your brains and realize that these are not the same people. I think that it's okay to express your distaste for the character, but you should be respectful to the actors. Helena, who is portrayed by Fia Saban, is the only person from the Greens I wish a happy ending. She is so nice and innocent, and people don't really take her seriously, but that girl says something that seems weird, and it's actually a hint at something to come. When Jaharis dies, she doesn't say much, but you can really see the pain in her face, which is heartbreaking. People are talking about Jaharis' death as the heir being killed and want this public funeral, but from Helena's perspective, it was her son that got killed, and to top it off, she had to bear witness to her mom getting her back blown out. I do wonder if Helena cares about Aegon at all, because they never really show her visiting him after his injury. At the end of the season, we get to hear her talk a little bit more, and we learn she sees more than she lets on. When Aemon tries to recruit her to ride her dragon in the war, which she refuses, she lets him know she saw Aegon get burned by Aemon, that Aegon will be king again, and that Aemon will be dead. And she communicates with Daemon and Alice from where she is at King's Landing. I think I just love how, with all of the craziness going on, she said, I'm just going to sit back and not involve myself and just, have my little dreams, and y'all go ahead and have fun. While House of the Dragon Season 2 was good, I really felt like at the beginning of the season they hinted that this war was looming and that we would see more of it, but throughout the season they just dragged it on and war was always looming. I know that there were a lot of pieces being put into place for the future, but they really could have given us more because the way that the season ended made it feel like an incomplete season or a trailer for the next season and not its own confined season. I think that this is something that was a challenge, not only for this show, but it happens sometimes. How much to give the audience? I hope next season they can find a better balance between, what needs to be shown in the current season versus what can be hinted at for future seasons. There were some storylines this season that was dragged out way too long, and some characters I felt they focused on too much and some not enough. Hugh, Ulf, Daemon's haunting, the Tywin Lannister stuff with the Triarchy, Alicent's spa day, and Rhaena's hunting trip, to name a few, were storylines that I felt could have been shorter. I really wanted to see more interactions with Baela and Jace. Hell, just give me more Baela on the screen. Learn more about Rhaena because she has been around but doesn't say much. Give us Darren, more Cregan, or maybe get to the war that's been looming on the horizon. A lot is going on in this show, and the length that they chose to focus on some storylines confused me because that time could have been better spent focusing on something else. If there's one thing I love, it's some dragons, and we get to see so many this season, and I love seeing them all, and it's hard to pick a favorite, but it's definitely between Meleys, Sunfire, and Caraxes. I was sad when they would go to battle because I was like, I don't want the dragons to get hurt. Most of the time I don't really care about the people, but they just seem like pets just thrown into a battle, and some of these dragons are parents too. Vhagar would be the exception. That raggedy piece of leather can rot. The show subtly hints at the lore behind these dragons, and I wish they would give us more about what the common folk think of the dragons and how they view them, because we often see the more affluent people talking about the dragons. This season expresses that most people feel the dragons are like gods and are invincible. And when the Greens parade Meleys's head in the street, it proves that these dragons are not gods and are not invincible and can be killed, which is a bad omen. The Greens aren't the only ones that would make people challenge past assumptions, because Rhaenyra inviting commoners to try and claim a dragon, and some being successful, would make people question if the Targaryens are special, if anyone can claim a dragon, since they don't know that these people probably came from a Targaryen. Both sides are so focused on each other that they fail to realize how the normal folk are realizing more and more that the Targaryens aren't as special as they thought and that dragons can be challenged. Obviously, there is going to be some hesitation because, yes, they can be killed, but they can also eat you and burn you, and there's a decent amount of them. I do love how this season we meet more dragons and see how these dragons are bonded with their rider. When season 1 released, they slowly released all these videos where it was the cast doing interviews or playing games with each other. And they did it again this season, and I love it. It's so interesting to see them interact off screen and see how people like Eve Best will always ride for Team Black, and how Tom Glenn Carney seems like a cool person who would be fun to work with. I hope they continue these interviews because I am always interested to see how they will be paired up and see how they are so different from the characters that they play. The cinematography in this show is just great, and there are some small things done that make a big impact. One that stands out to me is the beginning of episode 2, where we see the maids cleaning up after Jaehaerys' death, but we don't see the room. We just see them coming in and out of the room in slow motion with these bloody sheets and the look of pure horror on their face. It really lets the viewer take in this tragedy and how traumatic it can be even in the aftermath. There was another episode later in the season where Rhaenyra sends food to King's Landing, and I learned that the camera was always moving in that episode to further drive that the world was constantly changing. The cinematography really elevates the scenes, and there are some truly beautiful moments in this show, especially when we are taken to new locations and we get a big picture glimpse of things. The costumes and hair and makeup are also impressive, and they deserve a special shout out. There are a varying array of looks, and it's cool to see how they tie in their houses or loyalty into what they're wearing. Even some of the characters I hate look so good in their outfits, and I hate to say it, but I must give them props. My favorite part of this season was Rhaenys and Sir Simon. I have talked about these characters already, but they truly made the show better, and while I didn't have an issue with any of the other actors and their performances, these two just really stood out. I'm sad we won't see more of Rhaenys, but I hope we get to see a lot more of Simon in the future. House of the Dragon Season 2 sets up a lot of pieces, but fails to put enough of those pieces into play, which made me feel like I was watching an incomplete season, waiting for something else to come. The cast is great, and there is so much more to explore with this world, but I just hope for Season 3 they figure out their pacing, but make sure to give us all the dragons. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so you can keep up to date with more of my videos. But besides that, everyone stay safe, have fun, and goodbye.